The Georgia State Panthers introduce new head football coach Dell McGee. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, Georgia State introduces their new head football coach, Dell McGee. We bring in Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com, part of 24/7 Sports. We had Ben Moore on last week. We'll give Ben a break and bring Brady on, talk about the process, getting him hired, what the process is from here, because there's a lot to do in a very short period of time, and the expectations in 2024. So let's get to it. He is Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Dave Schultz back with another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. They finally got around to introducing the new head coach of the Georgia State Panthers. It took them long enough. Dell McGee introduced to the masses on Monday. We bring in Brady Wier from GSU Panther Talk. Brady, let's talk about this process. People from, Atlanta, won't give away my sources, but they kept on harping on me that we're the only ones looking for a head coach, so no big deal. Tell us about the process from your point of view. I won't reveal who kept on harping on me, Brady.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. All along in my head, Dell McGee was at or near the top of my list of this is the person they should get, just because of the Atlanta connections, the recruiting he's done, and what he would bring in all of those aspects. And he was lower on my list of the people we'd heard names because I wasn't sure if he was going to want the job because he's getting paid well, or he was getting paid well at Georgia as the running backs coach. And we've already seen this offseason, Sean Elliott included, sitting G5 coaches decide that they want to go and get a lower position at a power conference job. And so his name was kind of not out of nowhere, but Wednesday night it came up. And if you had asked me Wednesday afternoon, I would have said Brian McClendon, or I would have said, Willie Simmons, someone like that before I said Dell McGee. But it caught some helium. It came out from Graham Coffey, covered UGA, very late on Wednesday. And then Friday we had a deal. Charlie Cobb, the athletic director, does not play it out in the media. He doesn't like having leaks. And so it was unsurprising to me that it played out the way that it did, because it's not his MO to play the media game like that. And so I think it's boring as far as covering it, but at the end of the day, I think they got to, one of the better hires they could have made given the circumstances. The job opens up in the middle of February.
Well, you're not the only one who thought that. My guy Brooks Austin, who I know covers Georgia, but really does cover high school recruiting there as well as in the entire state. As soon as the job opened up, he goes, Dell McGee. I think that was the tweet, just Dell McGee would be a great fit. Tell everybody why, besides the recruiting, that somebody who's not been a coordinator, who hasn't been a head coach on a G5 or Power 5 level, for that fact of the matter, why he's such a good fit at Georgia State.
I think you could make the case that he's been on the staff since he's been an FBS assistant with two of the top 10 coaches in college football right now. I mean, Kirby Smart, inarguable. He's one of maybe the top guy now that Nick Saban is retired.
Right.
Willie Fritz, who he was with for 2 years at Georgia Southern, is also up there. Maybe doesn't get enough credit for the job he did at Tulane, did at Georgia Southern. He's kind of just won everywhere he's at, and probably is going to do the same now that he's at Houston. But he has been under two really good head coaches who know how to run programs. And so, yeah, he hasn't been a play caller yet. He hasn't been a coordinator, but that was never, I don't think, the selling point for him as a head coach. I think he's going to be kind of a CEO type, kind of like what you've got with Kirby, like you've got with Willie Fritz. The plan for him will be to hire good coordinators and let them kind of cook in that regard. But you're hiring a guy that's been around a high level recruiting operation. Many people saying he is one of the essential parts, was one of the essential parts for Kirby Smart at Georgia, doing recruiting, getting out there across the country, landing some really talented players, but especially in the state of Georgia. And so that he's going to take that on a lower scale. And I'm sure you're going to ask about the press conference today and just takeaways. One of them that stuck out to me is it sounds like he's both recognizing that Georgia State is not Georgia as far as resources, as far as everything. And he even acknowledged a conversation he had with Kirby when he was saying he was going to take the job, where he was like, I know you're going to come after my players if I get good players. Like, he recognizes the landscape. He also seemed like he had a plan to up the NIL operation for Georgia State as much as is possible. Not going to match your Georgia, but both recognizing that it is what it is right now, kind of the G5, P5 divide, but also wanting to do more about that. And I almost wonder if what he said in the interview as far as that was one of the real reasons he was the guy who ended up landing the job when all was said and done.
Well, and it is Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Dave Schultz along with Brady Wier, PantherTalk.com, talking about Dell McGee being introduced at the press conference on Monday. So it feels like he's got a good grasp of reality about what is going on with the portal and NIL. And, you know, talking to Kirby, like, if I find somebody who ends up good, you're going to take them. But he also said we're going after the high school kids. The way we're going to get better is the high school kids. The problem is you get the high school kids, you develop them for 2 years, they have one good year, and then they're gone to the P5. I mean, is that going to work? Does that model work?
Well, everything we've heard about Dell McGee as a position coach was that he's like the prototypical players coach. And he even said that today in his press conference about, like, my door is always open. I'm a players coach. And so I feel like part of the calculus on his part is thinking he's going to recruit these players and they're going to want to stay a little bit. And then also by that point, a couple years into his tenure, upping the NIL collective, which already launched last year, all blue, all NIL, and making it more to where you're potentially saving a couple of these guys. But yeah, I think that the high school recruiting is why you hired him, and having him not shy away from that is only encouragement of, like, this is what we were hoping to get, because especially in the Atlanta area, just Georgia in general, Georgia State wasn't a major player, even for a group of 5 school in Georgia recruiting. And there's no real reason they can't be. I think you're going to always have some kids who want to leave the state and want to leave the city and go somewhere, but not everyone will. And I think that what has maybe stopped them from taking that next step and being a program contending for the top of the Sun Belt, winning the title, is you've got programs like Appalachian State and Troy in the Sun Belt and other group of 5 leagues that are coming to Georgia, coming to Atlanta, and getting really solid 3-star recruits that they are then developing and beating Georgia State with. And so I think that what he is going for is keeping more of those kids. And he even called, diamonds in the rough, recognizing you're not going to get the creme de la creme like you do at Georgia, but that there's a lot of talent, and maybe some talent that doesn't get all that much recognition for all of the, all the schools there are in the state of Georgia in the metro Atlanta area. And that you keep more of those players there. And especially if you have like a bunch of, if you do a really good job with evaluation and development, if you lose a couple of guys here or there, maybe it's lessened than what you've seen the last couple of off seasons with Georgia State, where even if you are losing guys, maybe you're not losing everybody every off season, and always doing that roster churn.
Okay, let's take a timeout. When we come back, more of our conversation with Brady Wier about what is the process now for new head football coach of Georgia State, Dell McGee. We'll do that right after I tell you about FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to it. Our conversation with Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com. What's the process for new head football coach of Georgia State, Dell McGee, moving forward? See, some of that information blows me away. I don't understand why Georgia State wouldn't be recruiting, one of the most talented states in high school football and cities in America. A lot of urban places, that tend not to have, big-time football players. Like, off the top of my head, I guess Atlanta and Miami are there two biggest. I guess LA is probably another one. But, I find that interesting and mind-boggling. Like, 2 years into his tenure, Brian Harsin was complaining that when he arrived in Auburn, he was dealing with COVID as if that wasn't a big favor because he didn't have to get into a car and he could have just Zoomed everybody and had a conversation with every coach from the comfort of his office or home and not worry about it. Obviously, times have changed. Now we can go back face to face, but this thing is not nearly as difficult as people make it. You should be knee deep into the recruiting in Atlanta, and somewhere along the way, you're going to find somebody. May not be a lot, and it may take a little bit of work, but you're going to find somebody who wants to play right away, who doesn't necessarily want to go to Georgia. Maybe he ends up there in his third year, right before he goes pro. But somewhere along the way, with all the recruiting that you do now, you're going to find some. It's not diamonds in the rough. You're going to get somebody who maybe doesn't want to go away. Maybe there's a family situation and he wants to stay home. Who knows? Or you find somebody in rural Georgia who wants to come to the big city and doesn't want to go to Athens. Is it as complicated as people make it? Because it seems to be a lot more difficult than it should be. This should not be that difficult. Getting the kids to come there is one thing, but trying to recruit in Georgia and Atlanta just seems to be obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just a case of Dell McGee's got those relationships in Atlanta, and Sean Elliott never did really. And some of it was never fostering it. Some of it was maybe just there was the perception that the Georgia State staff wasn't interested in Atlanta kids, and so that kind of grew, and you got some, it's all transactional. So if you have a relationship with a college coach you like, you're not going to necessarily say you have to sign with them, but you're going to be more, when the kid is coming to talk to you about it, you're probably going to be more willing to have that conversation of, yeah, you should go there. And I think with Coach McGee now, they've got a guy that all the Atlanta high school coaches really like. You saw a lot of quote tweets and replies to the news from Georgia State football with a lot of coaches being like, congrats and excited and talking up just what the possibilities could be there. And so some of it was choice, some of it was effort, some of it might have just been, Dell McGee is better at recruiting in Georgia and recruiting in Atlanta than Sean Elliott is. And everyone's got their strengths, and you still churned out a lot of bowl teams that were winning a fair amount of football games. I do think that not having that top end recruiting in the Sun Belt is what probably cost you getting to a title game and all that entails. But, I think it just maybe the takeaway is we'll see. Maybe you don't have to play on hard mode, which is a little bit what you're doing when you're not playing in Atlanta nearly as deep in the recruiting scene as Georgia State was not doing.
I'm sorry, what was that? You don't have to play what?
On hard mode.
On hard mode. Got it. Okay. Is that a video game reference?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Expert mode. Yeah.
All right. It is Brady Wier from Panther Talk. Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right. What's the process from here? Because, spring practice has been put on pause. He's got to go out. He said he's going to sit down and meet with every one of the players and their families. That would take some coordination. He's got to hire assistant coaches. Now who's going to stay with the program? Those guys have been in limbo for the better part of, I think Wednesday makes 2 weeks for the assistant coaches. They're going to stay or get new jobs. Tell us the process that Dell McGee explained at the press conference on Monday.
Yeah, so I don't know how busy you felt like your day was, but I think he's got us both beat because he did a press conference, and then I think he was doing photos after that and meeting with, as you say, 85 plus players and their families over the next 2 days and talking to the coaching staff. So a lot on his plate right now. The spring practice part of it, from what I understand, so I'll give you the timeline I think you can follow because you're covering the basketball stuff. So 2 weeks after Pensacola is when everything is going to start ramping up, because the week after Pensacola is the spring break for Georgia State. And so they want to start after spring break. And so that's, March 18th, something in that ballpark. So he's got about a month now to have a staff in place and ready to go for spring practice. And so I still think it's going to happen pretty quickly. I'm sure the conversations on his side have been happening from when he knew he was going to get the job. So I'm not saying that he's going to walk it out this entire month getting a staff together. But what I'm saying is I think that they're going to have plenty of time to get set and still, almost like normal, have a spring practice, have those 12 practices they have left in a spring game sometime in the middle of April. And then you move on to the offseason like it's any other year. So on that side of things, and the other part of it was about
Well, the coaching, no, just the process from here is what we were talking about. But let's get back to that. So it's actually the 18th, if that's what you're telling me. That's actually 3 weeks. Okay, so now,
3 weeks from now, 2 weeks after Pensacola.
Okay, so that's right. Okay, so now you got to get a staff, and then somewhere along the way, the staff has to teach the players what they're doing. Like they could be I presume they're starting from scratch, depending. Right, this depends. Do we keep the offensive coordinator? Do we keep the defensive coordinator? Once that's figured out, we'll see where we go. But if you bring in somebody new, now spring practice is really going to be, football 101, just to make sure we have what we need to have, like a basic understanding of what we want to do going into fall and at the end of July, beginning of August. Yeah,
certainly. And to that point, I don't have anything like concrete on this, but I have a feeling probably the staff's going to be mostly new. I think there's a couple of obvious retention candidates, both of whom were Georgia State alums. Dan Ellington, who's been on the offensive staff for the last 4 years, and Antrell Allen, who's been on the staff for the last 2 years, are both alums of the program. So if anyone were going to stick, they would make sense to have somewhere around the program just because of what they stand for as far as being already out of the program and into the coaching staff. But I do expect it to be a pretty new staff just because, Dell didn't shy away from this when we did a breakout session after the press conference. He was asked about, he's like, yeah, there's going to be some casualties of the coaching staff just because I want to have guys who come in that I have worked with and I know what they're about, because it's different when you hear someone recommend, hey, this guy's great, even if he is, than just trusting your gut and going with someone for sure. And so all of that will work out over the next couple of weeks. And yeah, it might be a bit of a weird spring as far as, I guess, where they're starting out with the playbook and everything. But I will say this, and this is something that Dell offered at his press conference. He took over his high school coaching job at Carver Columbus in the summer after retirement. And so he made clear that he didn't think it was that much of an obstacle and that he had been in a similar situation before. And this is more time than that was. And so I think he knows he's operating a little bit behind time and he's got enough to catch up. But honestly, I think when they have a staff in place, when all the immediate press conference stuff is over and, whatever else he's doing to set up his new life as Georgia State head coach, when it's just the football stuff, I bet that's going to be the easiest part of all of this for him and his staff.
Right. All right. So I'll ask you, was he promoted from the high school gig or did he come in new? And there was no transfer portal when he went to coach the high school thing. So not only are we going to have, getting a staff together, not only moving his family there, right? Hiring new assistants. And he's got the portal is going to reopen up again. The portal, you let me know because I can't keep it straight. Did the portal open again up for the Georgia State players because of a coaching change? Isn't that a rule too?
So they're in the middle of a 30-day window where they can leave. So far, I don't think there have been any that announced that weren't already announcing their intentions before the coaching change. I don't think that will last necessarily, but that's just, as we're talking right now, there hasn't been any kind of real exodus from the team. I think they were waiting to see the new coach come in, and mid-April, I believe, is the time when the portal for everyone reopens. And so they're on top of all that. And honestly, what I would say is if this is going to be a successful tenure, the stuff like that about the portal, about the recruiting stuff that Dell McGee has pitched as his thing, that the biggest strength he possesses, I think you just kind of have to figure they're going to have a hold on that type of stuff. And there's a lot of moving parts in the air with all of this, but it is kind of the selling point, is the thing that he has really been around that type of operation the last 8 years at Georgia, to where I think you expect in that part, he can definitely hit the ground running. And he said he's setting up Zooms with the high school coaches and opening up the doors to high school coaches to where, anyone can come and see what Georgia State's about under Dell McGee. And I think that's going to be another sign that those coaches are really going to like just the vibes, the feeling that Georgia State is operating in a different way in the recruiting sphere than they were before.
Talking to Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com. Is it GSU Panther Talk? Panther Talk. Ben Moore lives. What's the name of the website?
Yeah, it's Panther Talk is the affiliate of 24/7 Sports. So if you go to GeorgiaState.247sports.com, it'll get you there.
Okay. All right. Well, he has to know a little bit of something about Georgia State, right? I mean, not only has he been in the state for a while, but didn't his kid just commit to play there?
Yeah, Austin McGee, going to be an incoming freshman playing cornerback. And
One of his family members was already moving to Atlanta.
Yeah, after like an hour after the news came out, the announcement came out, his son put out a post from his official visit that both his parents were at. And if Dell wasn't wearing a Georgia State gear at that point, it looked like kind of a generic blue something to match, just because he's a sitting coach at Georgia. He's not going to do that. But
right.
Like kind of the cherry on the top of this story for everyone involved, because I'm sure a couple of months ago when Austin signed his letter of intent, he was excited to go to Georgia State and had no idea his dad would be the head coach in a couple of months. And I'm sure Dell, knowing that his son was signing with a Division I FBS team, was excited about that facet of it, but had no idea that in a couple of months he'd be coaching his son. And so, Georgia State's not new to this. Ron Hunter and RJ Hunter obviously made a lot of headlines with the father-son athletics combination. And so I'm maybe not expecting that type of level of immediate impact as what RJ had, because basketball is a totally different sport from football. But along the years, as he's, continues to be here at Georgia State, will be a fun thing to follow. And I'm sure it'll get mentioned on like every national broadcast Georgia State does for the next couple of years.
Right. Did you know? All right. Let's take one more time out. We'll wrap up our conversation with Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com. What are the expectations for new head football coach Dell McGee? Georgia State has a ton of experience coming back. We'll do that right after I tell you about Gametime. Gametime, fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Just download the Gametime app and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day, wrapping things up with Brady Wier, the part of the host, part of the PantherTalk.com, talking about new head football coach Dell McGee and what the expectations can be in 2024. A few more minutes here with Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com, part of 24/7 Sports, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. All right, so I've seen, I think, from you and Ben Moore, all of the the word would be experience. That's the word I'm looking for. All the experience, all the juniors and seniors that are returning to Georgia State, they do not lack that, but they do lack in one key position. What are the expectations coming into 2024, knowing that they have to find a replacement for Darren Granger at quarterback?
Yeah, so they did lose, Marcus Carroll goes to Missouri, Tyleik Williams entered the portal, Robert Lewis, wide receiver, leading receiver, now at Auburn. So they lost some guys. The funniest thing about all this is that Sean Elliott and his staff actually did a pretty decent job of filling the needs they had in the December window with portal signings. And there was some buyback there to where you got some guys that you think can fill in roles, guys you lost. You've got rising sophomore Isaiah Guy at cornerback that honestly was playing better than some of the upperclassmen at times last year, and he's got experience coming back. He's going to go through the entire spring and fall as the starter. I think he's going to be really good. And as far as I'm not filibustering because of the quarterback thing. I don't know at this point, because I know that Braylon Ragland's a redshirt freshman that the previous staff recruited. The staff brought in Zach Gibson from Georgia Tech in the spring in December. I'd still say right now Gibson's going to be the quarterback just because he's got the experience, but I do think the coaching change throws it in flux ever so much to where they're going to come in and look at what they've got, and it's possible with new eyes and a new idea of what they want the offense to be. In this next portal window, they go and get a quarterback, or they add another high schooler and go it that way. I don't know. We're going to see how that all plays out. Certainly, I think whoever comes in as the offensive coordinator, quarterback's coach, is going to want their guy at quarterback. And because they've got the opportunity to go shopping again another time, it certainly wouldn't floor me if they ended up getting another guy and we're talking about a third quarterback that would be potential options. But internally, those are kind of the two guys right now. It feels like it's probably Gibson, but Ragland's 3-star redshirt freshman quarterback that I think the last staff felt pretty good about as he developed. And so you've got some options. Maybe you add another once you go through spring practice and see what you currently have.
Well, unless I missed something, isn't the Sun Belt Player of the Year still in the transfer portal, Jordan McLeod from JMU?
That's true. I think there was some fake news a couple of months ago. He was going to transfer to Auburn, and he said, no, that's capped. So, I mean, that would certainly be a swing. If Dell McGee made that as his opening salvo as Georgia State head coach, as far as saying he was going to up the recruiting, I think that would make a lot of Panther fans happy. And they're already really happy with the hire as it is, but certainly you just throw out a name that would intrigue a lot of Georgia State fans. They, for the bad reasons, remember what he did in Atlanta last November.
So are they expected to compete for one of the few conferences that will still have divisions, the Eastern Division? I mean, a lot of, we'll see App State's got their quarterback coming back. Marshall has their issues with quarterback. JMU breaking in a new quarterback and new coach. Where do we think Georgia State is? We'll put it this way. What are the expectations and what do you think they're going to do? And those things may not be the same thing.
Yeah, it's really hard at this point to say for sure, because I think, like you talked about, there's certainties about every team, but there's also some unknowns in every offseason with every team. Last year, we were kind of having this conversation with Georgia State where they had lost some guys in the portal. It was like, how are they going to manage? And I think at the end of the year, it felt like a disappointment because you turned a 6-1 record into a 7-6 bowl season.
Right.
And you lost your last fight of the regular season. But I don't think at this point last year, a lot of people were expecting a bowl team for Georgia State. And so with the portal being what it is and with some of the additions they've made, it wouldn't shock me if they still find a way to a bowl game. And certainly I think Dell McGee is coming with the intention of competing right away. I did not get any kind of indication he's playing down expectations in year one. Winning's kind of what he's become accustomed to everywhere he's been at the FBS level. And so whether that's realistic, I think time will tell. And look, I mean, the Sun Belt is going to be a bear every year is the thing, and especially the Sun Belt East, as long as these divisions stay in place, because there's a lot of good teams. But I think we're just going to have to see how it plays out. I'm totally taking the cop-out answer, but we got some months. I think it's a valid cop-out.
It's fair. I would presume App State is the favorite, but we'll see who JMU gets his quarterback, and I like the new head coach. And
I think James Madison has earned the benefit of the doubt because the transition they made, and they made basically the same type of hire with Chesney that Stignetti was, or just guy who had won at the places he'd been before. And so I still kind of expect they're going to be players at the top of the Sun Belt East, but that's an expect at this point. We still have to see how that transition happens as well. Not to say anything about, Marshall's got a new quarterback, all across the league. There's lots of questions, and it's February, but I already want answers. I'm ready for football season.
Right. Well, we're almost done. Although I guess we're bogged down with an extra day in February this year. Let's wrap things up with Brady Wier from PantherTalk.com, 24/7 Sports. All right. Anybody outside of App State or JMU going to win the Sun Belt basketball tournament?
I mean, Troy is still in there, and Troy kind of is living in that, like, oh yeah, don't talk about us. We're not that good, but like, they're pretty good. Like if you overlook them, and they play good defense, and they don't have like maybe the top end level, and I think they are a level below JMU and App State. Like I think those two are the best teams in the conference considerably, but they can grind you into a low scorer. They can make it tough on you, and they could definitely eke out a game against whichever probably James Madison ends up as the 2 seed. Right, make their way to the championship game. Past that, there's teams that are certainly on their best game pretty good, but I think a lot of flaws exist. The other team that I would mention, maybe not as winning the whole thing, but kind of in the same categories with South Alabama last year, where they're just playing really well right now, and I don't think anyone really wants to see them, is Arkansas State. I mean, that offense is going crazy good right now to where they just had a fun national TV win over Troy that I think if you had to peg the candidate like South Alabama last year, where it's like, who is going to be the lower seed who makes some waves in the tournament, I think they're the easy pick.
Yeah, but Arkansas State's not even a lower seed anymore. They're 4th. Right now they're 4th. South Alabama came from like 8th last year. That's the thing. Don't overlook South Alabama either. They're doing crazy things with Tabby down low, kind of Isaiah Moorish, where they got a smaller guy posting up smaller guys than he is and scoring about 25 a game as of late. I would be shocked if it was anybody but App State and JMU.
The standings are still to be played out, and I think Arkansas State could still be, I think, a 5 or a 6. I don't think
they could. They have, right.
But if they're that 6 seed and Troy hasn't played a game and you're coming in facing Arkansas State with a game under the belt, I just don't think they would love that matchup. And I can see why, just because their offense is doing crazy things right now.
It is. Well, that whole thing is going Arkansas State wraps up the season at App State. And the thing is, though, so that's a Friday night game. App State's not going to play again until the following Saturday, where, like you mentioned, if Arkansas State loses that ball game and somehow the Cajuns sneak into fourth, they'll play on that Thursday, but they'll get an off day on Friday and play again on Saturday, and that's not a problem for college basketball teams. Whereas we saw Southern Miss and Marshall get beat by lesser seeds last year after having the double bye.
Not a fan of the format, but I understand why it exists, and that's another 15-minute podcast topic, so we can leave it off there. But
build another.
You're certainly right that you got to be careful as the high seed with these teams if you've been off for a week. So coaches have got to bring out their best, whatever, to stem not playing a competitive game for a week, because the season's done, but the real prize is still waiting. And if you had a great regular season and a bad week off, then that's all it's going to take to not cut down the nets in Pensacola.
I know from experience last year, Mark Byington was not happy the way the season ended. I mean, they could not stop Isaiah Moore. All right, what is coming up on PantherTalk.com?
Lots and lots of coaching news, hopefully. The trickle of that coming through, nothing official from the school yet, but I mean, that's really what we're looking at this point. Like, the most important thing to follow for Georgia State football right now is the staff that Dell McGee puts together, because for all we're talking about the recruiting wins he might get, the next part of it is putting the X's and O's together and putting out the winning product on the field. And so that's what we're watching right now.
We're probably going to find out who's let go before who he brings in. Unfortunately, that's what's going to happen, because these guys who are let go got to let people know they need a job, and fast. You know, it's kind of everybody's in a tough spot. He's Brady Wier, PantherTalk.com, part of 24/7 Sports. Thank you, Brady, for hopping on Locked On Sunbelt. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.